What is up, y'all? Hey, I just got finished listening to my hype song, or one of the many hype songs that I have, because I am feeling a whole lot of emotions today. Not gonna lie, not gonna lie, and we're gonna get into them. So, thanks for joining me. I am imagining that we are like sitting in this kumbaya circle, sharing our feelings and our thoughts, and it's my turn. So, hey, welcome. I'm Nannearl. Let's get into it. So, as far as me and who I am, I'm a researcher on the growth team. So, basically, what that means is I talk to a bunch of different people to understand like what they need in order to start using Figma and how they can continue to grow with Figma's products. And I'm also a YouTuber. Yes, if you haven't heard, my YouTube channel is called Unpacked Angles, and on this channel, I talk about UX and self-care, and I just hope to widen the perspective on that and more. I really believe in authenticity when talking about just all the things, and so that really resonates through that YouTube channel, and I think you'll get a taste of that as we continue to go through this presentation. And I also host a few rooms on Clubhouse under the Club UX Research Corner. So if you're on Clubhouse and you want to check that out, I talk to researchers from all over the world every so often. I think it happens on a weekly basis. Today we're taking a spring break, at least this week, to give us some time to rest. But yeah, I do that on Clubhouse, and it's a lot of fun to talk about research with a whole bunch of different researchers. But my life is not all about research. So as much as I enjoy UXR, I am also into other things. So a little bit more about me. I recently got into heavy metal, or just like metal period. Over quarantine, I got lost in a YouTube hole and then somehow ended there. And it's been pretty cool. So I'm like really into metal. Into that, also started teaching myself the violin this quarantine break, I guess. I don't know if we're calling it a break, honestly, because it does not feel like one. But yeah, I've been teaching myself how to play the violin. I found out you could rent violins, which, you know, who knew, but found that out, rented me one, and still have it today, still practicing. So I really enjoy that. And as far as like a few other things about me, what sparks joy, I love Breath of the Wild. I'm sure some Figmates know my Zoom background oftentimes is Breath of the Wild, some scene from there. And as far as a fun fact goes, I name basically everything that I have. So I have a few plants, I have a money tree named Finn, an aloe named Jake, my violin's name is Chardonnay. I just name all the things. I really enjoy that. If I could swap bodies with an animal for a day, it would be a capybara, because they look like they understand like what the actual definition and essence of relaxation is. And so I really need that in my life. And as far as a life-defining experience for me, I've lived all over the world and had the opportunity to experience a whole bunch of different things because I'm an Army brat. And also, fun fact, I used to work at the Pentagon a few years ago under the CIO of the Army, which was not because I was an Army brat, but that's just something else. But yeah, so let's get into what we're really here to talk about. Whew. A lot has happened, y'all. A lot is still happening. And to be very honest, this presentation almost didn't happen. It really almost didn't. I like struggled to make this, but we're here and it's happening. Literally a thunderstorm just rolled through here and it was not to be played with, but now it's sunny. And so the universe clearly wanted me to have, or like to give this presentation today. So it's happening. But yeah, a lot has happened, right? Things are still happening. It's just 2020 and then 2021 so far. So I wanted to use this time as a reminder to you, like to give a reminder that if you thought you were alone, you're not. And so we'll get into it, don't worry. As far as the goal of this presentation, I know like, you know, we're sharing like feelings, thoughts, whatever, but I'm hoping to really acknowledge some of the things that have been happening and have happened. And I also want to leave you with some empowering things. And so as far as like what's been happening and like what we're going to talk about, I want to prep you as far as like the content. And so I have a content warning on this slide. We're not going to get too specific into the details about some of the events in 2020 and 2021, but we're going to talk about them at a high level. So just kind of like prepare your mind for that. And also, you know, I think a common theme through this presentation is going to be, you know, we don't have to be okay all the time. It's like fine. And so just like keep that in mind. And I want to leave you with some tools and some things that you can do for yourself when you do find that you don't feel okay. And so that's where the empowerment comes in. So I'm hoping that you'll take away a little solace knowing that you are not alone, like in your sentiment or like maybe things that you've been thinking or feeling, and that you can use these things that I talk about a little later to help you, be a little bit better for yourself and for everybody around you. So yeah. And with that said, we're going to talk about the elephants in the room because I feel like, they need to be acknowledged. Otherwise, like, what are we really here for? So first one, boom, she's big. The pandemic. I don't know, like, even where to start. I mean, the pandemic is still happening, obviously. So there's really no where to like end with this, but like nobody in the general public could have prepared for this, right? This is something that I wasn't prepared for. I did not want to experience this in my life, and yet it's happening. And so I want to acknowledge this because it's been a tough time for a lot of folks. Like, people have lost their jobs, people have lost homes, loved ones, feelings of contentment and happiness. Like, there's a lot of loss here, and there continues to be. And so I wanted to make sure that we acknowledge that before we continue. In addition to that, political turmoil, and there is some hair. There it is. Got it. Political turmoil. Yeah, especially in the US. I can't really speak for any other countries, although have like seen and heard some things on Twitter. But there have been a lot of emotions when it comes to like the political atmosphere, especially last year during election season and like earlier this year during the insurrection. Like, it's just a lot to deal with. And as like a member of the general public, it's like, how do you actually deal with that when it feels like you can't do anything? So yeah, the other elephant in the room, social injustice. I feel like I don't have to go too far into this. I mean, if you haven't noticed by now, I'm a Black woman. Hi. And racism is not a new thing, especially in America, right? Like, it's definitely not new to me. But at the same time, it doesn't necessarily make it any easier anytime things happen. And so, when you think about racism, or at least when I think about it, it's hard to process that type of information or like the things that happen because of it. And I can't really verbalize how it feels to like know that people bear ill content or not ill content, but malintent, ill will, or like unfair treatment to me and people who look like me just based off of the amount of melanin that our skin cells produce. It's a lot to take in there. Yeah, especially like super, super recent events. Then there's disasters, and those are never convenient, right? There's natural disasters and man-made disasters. And I think a common thing that the pandemic has done, like through all of these elephants that we're going to talk about, is like just made things like extra worse. And so it's not really any easier to deal with disasters right now. Then we have mass shootings. I feel like that speaks for itself. There's a lot of shared trauma with the pandemic, but then there's a lot of secondary trauma when we see other people experiencing things or like going through things. And I think that's something that we need to really take in and sit with. And then finally, on top of all of this, there's burnout. People are burning out. This is too much. Honestly, this is too much. I can't think on any single one of these elephants for too long and then function normally, like at the same time. Like, it's just not possible for me. And then all of these elephants are happening like at the same time. So it's just hard. It's hard. It is. And so how do I handle it? Well, I guess I'm going to tell you. I'll tell you a little bit about my experience. And so firstly, I would like to welcome you on board my struggle bus. Yeah, I mentioned that I'm a researcher. And so a major part of my job is to be present with people. So I have to be present with people who I'm talking to, whether that be people who use Figma, people who don't use Figma, my teammates and other Figmates that I work with. And I'm not just being present in terms of like listening to them. I'm making space for their emotions, for their experiences, for their thoughts. And according to my therapist, to be present with others, I have to be present with myself. And I'm just like, okay, but like how? How? That seems ridiculous. I mean, there are so many things going on right now, right? And I don't know if y'all have noticed or if you've heard, but today we launched Fig Jam along with a whole bunch of other different things. And so there has been plenty going on at work to focus on for like the past few months. And so I'm not trying to deal with anything else. I don't have time or space to process this outside stuff. Like my thoughts about them and my feelings about them, nah, that's not me. But this is what my therapist told me. And so I'm just like, how? And she gave me an answer and it was super unfulfilling. Like I was not expecting the universe, but I was, expecting magic. Like I wanted a little bit of magic in there, maybe something that I would hear if I like conjured a genie, something around that. And it was not that. This is literally what she told me. She said the answer was to make time. To make time. Like, what does that even mean? And so I'm just like, okay, to make time. Clearly, time is not an infinite thing for me. Like, it's finite. So I have to figure out like where the time is that I already have that I can use to like focus on myself. And I found that this is not easy. This is kind of hard. And so something that my therapist recommended to me was journaling. And I was just like, all right, yeah, we can try that out. And so when I made this time to like be with myself, I found that it did a few things. It took up energy, and that energy that it took up, I could not put toward work. So that was one thing. And it also took up a lot more emotional real estate than I was prepared to give. And so because of that, it was just really hard to focus on work. And I'm just like, all right. So one, things are still happening, right, in the world. Two, I still feel kind of shitty. So I'm like, yeah, I'm journaling, but give me some more. Like, what else? And then three, I'm doing all of this stuff and it's taking up time away from work. And that's kind of stressing me out. And so I'm just like, okay, what am I supposed to do here? Like, how am I supposed to deal with this? I'm gonna share a story with y'all. So not long ago, I was doing a research study and I had an interview scheduled and it was the last interview of the day. And so I was like ready to like get through it and be done. And I had this session scheduled, but I was also having a day. So I was like, man, I don't really know if I'm going to be able to like be present right now. Like there's a lot going on in my mind. Should I reschedule this or should I push through? And I decided, you know what? I'm going to journal real quick and then I'm going to push through. And so I journaled and then I finished journaling about 30 minutes before my session. And I was like, man, okay, I still feel a way. I'm still feeling a lot of emotions right now. I don't really know if I'm going to be able to do this, but I'm just going to push through anyway. And 30 minutes passes and the participant actually lets me know that they can't make it. They don't show up. They can't make the time. And I was like, oh my goodness, thank God, right? Because I don't know if I was ready to get into that. And it made me think two things. There's like one, okay, so because I had that thought, I clearly needed to reschedule. So that was something I needed to take with me into the future. From then on, I need to listen to myself a little bit better. And then two, what does it say about me as a researcher to be like, oh, thank God I don't have to do what it is that I do and that I like? So that just gave me some pause. And I was like, okay. So that brings us into my 3 asks that I have of everyone today, including myself. So my first ask is that we empathize with ourselves a little bit more. And so what does that actually mean? Well, let's get into it. There's a talk given by Vivian Castillo. She's a UX researcher. And in this talk, she talks about the role of shame and like what it plays in like UX research. And within this talk, she talks about like empathy being a really hot topic in the UX space, especially. And I was like, you know what? That's so true. It's like such a buzzword now. Everybody says empathy for everything, and it just seems really meaningless. And the reason for that Vivian states is that because nobody is including vulnerability in when they're talking about empathy. There's just empathy alone, and it seems really shallow. And you can't have empathy like with substance without vulnerability. And so one of the things that we can do to empathize with ourselves is to be more vulnerable with ourselves and like ask ourselves like what that actually means. So or vulnerability is necessary. Also, giving ourselves a little grace is necessary. We could all use a little grace, but do we give it to ourselves? I know I personally am really willing to forgive and forget as far as like people who make mistakes or people who are late. But when I'm late or when I make that same mistake, it's just like, oh my gosh, like I am such a terrible person, like the worst employee ever. Why do I even have this job? Like really down on myself. And I'm just like, wow, something I had to think about and like just truly sit back on and ponder was, why do I not extend this a same amount of grace that I give to other people to myself? And so if you find yourself being in that same boat, I would recommend that you sit with that thought as well and figure that out. And self-care, of course, right? There's a psychology resource from the Professional Psychology Research and Practice Journal that goes into self-care being an ethical imperative. And this is obviously like applied to psychologists and social workers. And in Viviane, or in Viviane's program, Humanity Centered, she has a module where she kind of goes into this and argues that it's also applicable to UX professionals, especially UX researchers, because we're making time and space for other people on a regular basis. And I would even go as far to argue as far as it being applicable to anybody who deals with people on a regular basis. And so if you are regularly making space for people's emotions, people's thoughts, people's experiences, then you need to be taking care of yourself. And I'm talking to myself too. And so what does self-care look like? And what can it look like for you? I would challenge us to think about what this means. So in a work context, like if we're not feeling well, are we saying that? Or are we just like, oh, I'm fine. Like if we don't feel well, like just say that. Also, are we taking breaks? Like, are we listening to our bodies and our minds? Like, are we closing our laptops when we're feeling tired or feeling overwhelmed? Right? And then are we scheduling vacation time, even if we don't have anywhere to go or anything to do? That's key. And I'm talking to myself too. I used to be really bad with breaks, like taking breaks, because I always felt like I needed more time. And I just wanted to get things done. And I found that being on all the time was not sustainable at all without me actually taking time out for myself. And so before, when I was talking about energy and emotional real estate that, things required in order to take care of me, I found that like when I actually did work on myself, I was working at work better. So things like reports, I hate writing reports, but I write reports. Things that used to take me days to do, like if I worked on myself and truly like just re-energized me by working on me, it would take me hours, like 3 or 4 hours, I could knock a report out. And so that was something that opened my eyes, was just like, maybe it's not about the time, maybe it's about the energy and the focus. And that's what I needed to focus on. Something that my team does that I really enjoy is we give our channel Slack updates. So we have like a what do you call it? A channel for stand-up. And so we have bullet points of just like things we're focused on for that day. And so yeah, we list those out. And for the last bullet point, instead of a bullet, we make it an emoji, like the lightning bolt emoji. And we talk about like what we're doing that day to give us energy, to energize ourselves, or like what fulfills us that we're planning on doing or that we already did. Or sometimes we just talk about how we're doing. And so I love this because 1, it allows us to hold each other accountable to doing these things regularly. 2, it also lets me see like what my teammates are doing and helps me get to know them a little bit better, just like outside of work stuff. And then 3, it reminds me to not just do work for the day. So I have to purposely figure out, all right, what am I going to do today that I actually like really, really, really enjoy outside of work? Not that I don't like my job, but just like outside of work. And so oftentimes for me, it looks like practicing the violin or exercising. Not this day though. But yes, shout out to the growth team. Hey. My second ask is that we support one another. And I think something that's key to remember when it comes to supporting others is that support can seem / be really fake or superficial, and that performative allyship is a thing. So just like keeping that in mind. So how can we go about actually showing genuine support? Let's talk about that. I think that this can look different at different levels, kind of just depending on like what's going on and who you're talking to. But of course, all of this comes with a level of vulnerability that is necessary. And so I think that vulnerability is key in order to provide genuine support. And here, I think all levels need to be vulnerable. And I have this human level just at the end of this list, because like we're all humans, right? It's going to be applicable to everything. But I think we need to always point that out. It's just like we are human beings. And so the arrows here and like the yellow is going to highlight as we continue to go on, like where I think the action could be a little bit more powerful, or most powerful out of all of these levels. And so let's kind of get into it. What can vulnerability look like? Being honest. Are we being honest about like where we need help? Right? And I think we can do this like with our teammates, with our managers, people who are around us. Are we being honest about that? And also, are we being honest about how we're doing? Right, that one's a tough one for me. Honestly, I'm still trying to like work through like how this actually can work, because there have been several times when I'm not doing okay, right? And so my manager will often ask me during our one-on-ones, just like, how you doing? It's like, not great, or I feel tired, or I'm exhausted, or, I don't know is a common thing. And sometimes it's like, I'm fine. But at the end of the day, it's just like, if I'm feeling all of these things, like everything is happening, all the elephants, and I just don't feel good, do I continue to keep saying that? Is that going to worry my manager or whoever it is that I'm talking to? Is this going to elicit like unintentionally support or like help that I don't necessarily need? Does this make me look bad as a direct report or like a teammate, always feeling sad? Like, I don't know. This is something I'm still thinking through, but yeah, I've found that being honest is more worthwhile than not. I'll tell you a quick story. When I started at Figma last June, I was not doing that great on my first day, because the protests due to George Floyd's murder was like, they were just popping off. And so it was like, it was a day. It was really heavy. I actually cried in like my welcome meeting, but I felt really supported because I let them know like, this is what I'm going through right now. So yeah, I think this can be most powerful actually coming from management, because sometimes it can feel a little bit lonely when you're just kind of an IC, like in the zone, an individual contributor in the zone. It's just like, I feel this way. Is anybody else feeling this way? And management kind of taking the lead with that can be really powerful. Speaking up. This can be uncomfortable for sure. This is hard, right? I mean, sometimes we don't know what to say. Sometimes we don't want to say the wrong thing, all of that stuff. And I think this can be most powerful coming from leadership. Honestly, like people who report to you or people who just work for your organization, they want to know like kind of where you stand. They want to feel seen. They want to feel supported. They want to feel safe, right? I do want to point out that I have like this little star on the team / IC level, only because, sometimes it's not necessarily wise to speak up. I do want to acknowledge that there are, places and environments in which we might exist that don't necessarily take a good, I don't know, have a good reaction to people speaking up like that. You may get fired. But, I think it's important to kind of read the room or read the atmosphere if you're not familiar with where you are before you do that. But yeah, speaking up can be very powerful. So as far as like leadership goes, like people want to know kind of where you stand. All of these people are bringing so much to work, right? And so silence is definitely very loud, and it does not indicate support. And so some things to think about. And then also listening. I think that's something that we can all do, honestly, and listening with the intent to understand and not to respond, right? We want to, open up the space and listen without judgment and without combativeness or defensiveness. Some people just want to be heard. And that doesn't even necessarily mean that they want to be responded to. I think it's a really good idea to kind of level set and figure out like what it is that whoever you're talking to needs. And this is something that I do with my friends, and we've kind of made it a regular cadence, is that we will ask each other, do you want me to give you advice? Like, do you want like an action plan here? Or do you just need someone to kind of like hold this space for you and allow you to let it out? That can be powerful too. And so I think there is definitely, it's worthwhile to put energy into figuring that out. And then of course, at the end of the day, like, we got to extend grace too. You really never know what people are going through / have gone through. So, extending a little grace can take you a long way. And this brings me to my final ask. Seek what you can. Seek out what you can. There are professionals who exist for the primary purpose of helping us. And there are also other resources that have been vetted by professionals that exist to help us as well. And so like, I'm a huge therapy advocate, and I always encourage people to take advantage of therapy. So if you do have the means and are able to take advantage of these types of services, I would highly encourage you to do so. I know, especially in the Black community, that therapy is stigmatized, and you might not think too highly of it. But I think at the end of the day, it's important to remember that this person is literally paid to sit there and listen to you, and they have no stake in whatever it is that you're going through, at least the good therapist. And so seeking those services out can be really advantageous. And so I have a few resources listed on this slide, and this slide is posted in community. So if you want to check out those links, you can go to the source in community and get those there and visit. There are a number of free and reduced care services that are being offered by various organizations to the Black community and to the Asian American and Pacific Islander community because recent events. And so even if you do not belong to those groups, there are actually a bunch of resources under there still that you can take advantage of. So feel free to look at those. And also there is the National Crisis Hotline up here. If you ever need to call or text, if you or someone you know is in crisis, there you have it. And I've also included more information on how you can help and to help you know what to do in those situations. And I would be remiss if I did not talk about burnout. And I want to keep this relatively short. I do have a YouTube video where I go through more of my experience with burnout, but bottom line is it's not fun. I do not recommend it at all. Please don't do it if you don't have to. And I don't think anybody has to, at least when it comes to burning out because of work. So what does burnout look like? It can be different depending on the person, but it stems from prolonged and excessive stress. And I burnt out a couple years ago. And for me, I just wasn't taking breaks, of course, and I was always exhausted, literally did not want to associate myself with any of the people, things, places that I was working with. And so in order to get out of burnout, I really had to step away. And I was fortunate enough to be able to just go back to my mom's house and literally do nothing for 3 months. And so that's literally what it can cost you if you go a little bit too deep. So I would encourage you to not do that. But yeah, I got a lot of rest, a lot of sleep, which are different. Rest and sleep are not the same, and did a lot of things that fulfilled me. And so I would encourage you, if you do think you're kind of suffering through burnout, to visit these resources. They're education resources on what you can do if you do think you're experiencing burnout. And I do want to point out that it is diagnosable, so you can get help from a physician if you really need to. But yeah, to sum it up, all I'm asking of you and myself is that we empathize and be a little bit more vulnerable with ourselves, that we support one another in what it is that we need, and that we seek out the information in order to help us do those things. And I recognize that I've been speaking from my experience. And so I may have said some things that empower me that don't empower you, or vice versa. I would encourage you to figure out what those things are for yourself and to practice them. And so, I think in closing, it's okay to not be okay. Recognizing that we're not okay is probably the first step, right? And then also taking care of ourselves and remembering that we are all just, in fact, only human, even if it seems like we're supposed to be a little bit more than that. Thank you. Feel free to hit me up on Twitter. I love to talk about this stuff. I also love metal, like I said before. So if you have recommendations, hit me. But yeah, thanks a lot. I hope y'all enjoyed. Back to our host.